Okay, and welcome to the second part of the French New Wave PowerPoint. So we're, just to go back to the beginning, we're looking at the codes and conventions of the French New Wave. Now this is a slightly different format, which is why there's been some weird sort of discrepancies with the font and stuff. But there is a version of this on the Firefly page. So just to continue, obviously we've looked at the band apart, where they're running through the Louvre, and you can see here actually on this freeze frame that it's all kind of off kilter as well. And you might have noticed in that sequence it's all handheld. You know, the directors doing the voiceover themselves, and they're actually running around the Louvre, and there's real security guards trying to stop them because they didn't get permission. And then you've got Antoine Daniel, this young boy in 400 Blows, spinning around a sort of wheel of death kind of thing, as he's sort of playing truant from school. And the world around him becomes this big sort of almost like a stream of film roll. Excuse me. And then again, from the end of the Coche Sans Coup, the same character sort of runs away from the character, and he can't go any further than the sea, and he stops, turns, and looks towards us. And suddenly the fourth wall is broken, and we're brought into his story, and the director's almost asking us, well, what do you think's going to happen? Is this the end of his story? And this is quite interesting because the director, François Truffaut, cast Douanel, the actor, Jean-Pierre Léaud, the actor, as Antoine Daniel. And Antoine Daniel is basically a young version of the director himself. And he kind of repeatedly appears in films by Truffaut over the course of his life as, you know, sort of different snapshots in his life as well. So it becomes kind of very meta, sort of autobiographical character. Quite often, because of the nature of the filming, they would take sound from on location sources. They might do post sync dubbing as well, the sort of thing that you might have seen with Bait. And quite often, just to kind of emphasize this idea about playing with the form, they would do things like just cut sound out, or you know, sort of have music. Particularly Godard was more with this as well. The music would kind of overpower the dialogue and, you know, sort of overwhelm the audience, so you couldn't actually hear what the characters were saying. But just have a look at this kind of sense of play with this sequence from A Band Apart, which, yes, has been ripped off many times by people far less talented. So that's a real drunk in the bar. He's not acting.
Bravo, Monsieur Ségalo, ça c'est du meuble.
Cette fois, c'est le moment d'ouvrir une deuxième parenthèse et de décrire les sentiments des personnages.
So again, we have the voice of the director doing a voiceover, and he's giving voice to the characters' inner thoughts as well about each other. Notice how they can't really dance. They haven't planned. You can see the people in the booth at the background just staring as well.
Arthur regarde sans arrêt ses pieds, mais il pense à la bouche de Lille, à ses baisers romantiques. Odile se demande si les deux garçons remarquaient ses deux seins qui remuent à chaque pas sous son chandail. Franz pense à tout et à rien. Il ne sait pas si c'est le monde qui est en train de devenir rêve ou le rêve monde. Arthur lançait une.
That's it. Lovely stuff. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. So you can see there the kind of real kind of play around with the sound dropping out, and then with the voiceover talking through the characters' voiceovers, and that kind of again ties into the ideas about existentialism. You know, sort of characters just thinking about their place in the world quite often. So in terms of some of the conventions of the French New Wave, quite often characters would be sort of anti-authoritarian and sort of question their position in society. Quite often they were gangsters or losers, or just people that didn't really fit in. Quite often they would sort of talk about themselves as if they're in a film. So there's a kind of very, very self-reflexive aspect to the French New Wave. The film's narrative of the characters often demonstrate that reflexivity, so they might hide out in a cinema or pretend that they're in a film and sort of have, you know, sort of cowboy shootouts and stuff like that. Quite often the films would be episodic. If you remember when we introduced experimental film, we talked about how experimental film quite often wouldn't have the 3-act narrative structure, but would instead be episodic. And a 3-act narrative structure, because its cause effect generally ends in a closed ending, where you have a clear sort of resolution for the characters, whereas a episodic story doesn't really have that. It has a kind of an open ending where it asks you to think, just like the end of the 400 Blows. What do you think is going to happen? Thematically speaking, quite often these films will be about characters who are unsure of their place within the adult world, about where they fit in, what their role is, what they do. The characters would often be existentialist, just to go back to that. And again, if you need more sort of work on that, there are a couple of videos on Firefly. Excuse me. So characters would often consider their own place in the world. They wouldn't really trust authority, particularly police officers were often shown to be sort of duplicitous and dishonest. But most prominently, this moment, the French New Wave, is very much about a love for film. You've got to remember that a lot of these people came together at the Cinémathèque Française, which is this cinema that would just show old films, and they met through this and they talked about old films, and they grew up watching loads of old films, and a lot of the French New Wave films are their expression of love for these old films. Not so much Varda, but definitely Truffaut and Godard, because these guys not only met through that, but they became journalists writing for Cahiers du Cinema. So they would interview filmmakers, they would write about cinema, they would write film theory, and indeed one of the core theories to do with film and the way that we think about film in these days, auteur theory, arguably originated in the French New Wave. They would quite often play around with audience expectations, so they would confound or contradict our expectations. So quite often characters would just die, or films would just suddenly end without any kind of resolution. So that is that. Now let me just go back to the Firefly page. Now I've had an email earlier on today saying that the Firefly page would be, Firefly in general would be updated because there's been some issues. But anyway, I really suggest you have a look at this video if you haven't already done so. Now, a little bit later, what I'm going to do is, if you've got the Varda Clear from 5 to 7 page, just wait for that to open. and I'm going to be talking you through and introducing you to Agnes Varda. We have some documents on there, some articles, about her on Letterboxd. You know, she's made the greatest directors ever and all that kind of thing. There's interviews with her, and so on and so on. And we've also got a Prezi, which we'll be presenting to you. What I do want to show you is this. It's not opening, which is really useful. Part of the title, Clio 5-7. Okay, so I just want to show you the opening from Clio 5-7 because it's quite a sort of distinctive title sequence. So the link again for here is on Firefly.
Oui, mademoiselle. Choisissez 9 cartes de la main gauche. Je sais, 3 pour le passé, 3 pour le présent, 3 pour l'avenir. Connaissez les tarots? Un peu comme ça.
Oh, nice. You might notice from the overhead framing, it's very kind of Wes Anderson, and indeed Wes Anderson sort of even took the font choice from Varda. Just let me sort of skip on a little bit if I can. I don't know if we can. But anyway, once you do get to see Clio, you'll see that we cut from this colour to the close-up, which is black and white. And the reason is that, Clio, the reason is that Varda, the director, only had a very small amount of colour footage. So she shot this tarot card reading from above, and then everything else is in black and white. So there's a kind of sort of drawing attention to the film itself, and you can kind of read about that here as well. So you've got like these kind of close-ups of the tarot cards, and then Cleo's face, and the back, and then the card reader's face, and so on. And the idea about fatalism and stuff is very, very at the heart of the film. But anyway, it's one to look forward to. It's a great film. So I'm going to finish it there. Let's just go here, and I'll speak to you soon.